Oh, okay, I like that. So, by a show of hands, if people could please raise your hand and let me know you can see the screen, I will proceed. That would be great. Looks good. I also want to let you know that we have different webinars tonight. Try to have at least 15 minutes to answer questions. And I recommend that you do a notepad so that you can take notes as we move forward in the presentation, which is going to be a lot of interesting. You can't raise your hand and say that you're here. Okay. So who was that speaking? Are you hearing this conversation? Okay. And so as we are speaking, Ron is dealing with the technical difficulties in the background. And I hope that will be helpful for us. But I do need you to be able to raise your hand so that we can participate together. You got it now? Okay, one problem solved. All right, we're going to try to do this at the time that we have allowed for us. I have some, hello? How does one raise their hand?
They go to their
you go screen. To the upper right-hand corner of the screen.
And click.
And you can click. You see that? Did everyone get that? Okay, that works. So we do have the raise your hand feature all figured out, and there's also a chat feature where you can type in answering questions that you may have. And you should have a welcome from me to the Working Well Together sponsored training seminar. So I hope that you have that message as well. We also, again, I can't emphasize enough, pardon me. That's the screen that I'm speaking from right now. When you log on, it should have been a welcome message. And one thing you see in blue is mute. That's going to be really important for us so that we don't get a lot of information in the background of the speech. And last but not least, I will cover our protocol. If you want to follow up with any questions or comments, please do so by contacting or and if you have anything specific for me, please make sure that I get that information. Now, in terms of language and communication, one of the things that I want to do that I'm going to practice on is I wanted everyone to raise their hand and let me know who they were. You've already done that assessment. But one thing you didn't know is that hello is spoken in many different languages, and it's not just the foreign language, it's actually different dialects, and there are things called Black Victoria and Jamaica. There are ways to say hello that may not be formal, but that are informal. And I wanted to experience that, since we use a little bit of our own technical difficulties, you will have a chance to interact in a little bit, so please be patient with me. In terms of our webinar goals today, it is my desire to help to develop communication skills for you that help you to establish a supportive network of care, to build trust, to develop communication skills to foster collaboration, and to build a workplace relationship. And if you don't have one already and you do want to build more or you don't have enough, this will encourage you to be able to expand your current network. Now, I want to talk a little bit or briefly about being a peer. Peer is going to be synonymous for many things in this particular channel that I want to talk about just for a moment. The requirements for the peer position differs according to the type of position, but it is central to all peer positions. And what is central to that position is self-disclosure. Peer support is based on people helping each other. who share similar mental health experiences. There are jobs that are established specifically for requiring confidential consent. Others that can be filled by peer or non-peer, and others that are generically designed for anyone to apply, but which are done so with the intention to place job announcements for peers who might find that. Now, some of the common terms of peer positions do include peer counselor, peer advocate, peer specialist, peer case manager, client liaison, recovery specialist, consumer coordinator, or even director. Today, there are many, many more terms and combinations of terms that are too numerous to list. In some places, the term peer specialist, the most common, is being avoided in favor of the word recovery specialist. And that due partly to the fact that the term peer identifies the person as a former consumer of mental health services or some other service. And they may not want to in the future, if or when they apply for a job outside of the mental health system, divulge that information. There are also examples of professionals adding the word peer to their title, or self-disclosing in order to be more honest and open with persons they serve. Many peer providers have professional degrees. Unfortunately, the term peer specialist has begun to be synonymous with someone with minimal skills or education beyond their mental health experiences, and who comes into a position at the bottom of the rung of a ladder. And many of these peer professionals are concerned that there is not a permanent stereotype of the peer specialist position as one seems to be developing. Nonetheless, together, and I say together, we, that's us, everyone on this phone and beyond, are practitioners. And we thrive in our creative and challenging environment, one that demands sophisticated work to be delivered with both a sense of purpose and urgency. Staff, peers, family partners, volunteers, and community have the opportunity to drive this challenging and stimulating consumer world. Now, this webinar is basically an internal personal experience, though it can be identified ultimately in behaviors. Therefore, the exercises included in this webinar are directed inward. They're designed to help the individual assess himself. Now, it enhances the learning if responses are shared at the appropriate time. And the main purpose of this webinar is to begin a thought process within ourselves that leads to favorable outcomes. And we are going to be looking at establishing a supportive network of peer to help sustain an environment of wellness. And we're also going to be looking at building trust within the workplace or the service environment within a multicultural context. We will also be developing communication skills to foster communication and become partners in creating culturally responsive care and treatment. And the fourth thing on my list of hopeful favorable outcomes today is to build workplace relationships, to identify and align individuals with workplace mentors, to build teams, and to identify resources. These resources can be helpful at building effective communication to increase successful interactions and to reduce stress. So there we go, and I just want to know, how am I doing so far? Please raise your hands if I'm doing okay. Now, there is one question that was raised, and I want to answer it in terms of, can you clarify regarding a family member, the peers and parent partners, and that type of involvement? And yes, we will be talking about the roles of all of those positions, and I would say that the communication webinar that we are discussing today will be germane to all of the roles, not describing the differences in terms of how they function in the field, but know that everyone should have this communication, and it is not specific to any one particular role. I think what I want to do now is go to a poll. And I want to ask your opinion. And that being, how accurately do you think you could restate someone else's opinion? Now, a poll should be coming up before you that you can answer and respond to those questions. And if that question is not coming up before you, please send me your answer via chat if you are able. Now your response will be A, no way, B, a little, there you go, it's up on the screen, C, my way, D, verbatim. Go ahead and answer the poll, and I'll give you your responses. 5 seconds. The poll is closing. And it looks like a lot of you just got the original poll? Okay, because it looks like 90% of you said you're doing okay. Oh, I see. The wrong poll was put up there. That was a poll that was asked at the very beginning of your registration. Yes. So we didn't get the right poll up there. Give me another chance. We're working in partnership here today, so I hope that we are being provided some forgiveness. Until then, let's move on to this slide. Not how we're doing today, but this slide is of what our agenda is going to be. And we're going to talk about communication a little bit today. But before I get into talking about communication, I want to let you know that the purpose of the webinar, which is exploring the influence of culture on communication, is actually to encourage understanding of how cultures affect the messages one delivers and how they communicate. This webinar is also going to explore how cultures affect communication behaviors and how culture influences verbal communication behaviors, as well as nonverbal communication behaviors. We lost the PowerPoint? Oh, you lost the PowerPoint. How about everyone else? Will you have the PowerPoint? Yeah, raise your hand if you have the PowerPoint. You had it? Okay, now here we go. Now we have the PowerPoint. Okay, it looks like we have to do some resetting. That is definitely technology. For some reason it dropped. So I know what to do next time. I'm looking at what happened and I'm going to see if I can anticipate that action happening the next time. What you should see on your screen is communication agenda. And we're talking, it's not on your screen? Okay, so who are you? Okay, San Bernardino. And everyone else, can you see my slide? Communication agenda? Okay, you clicked the control panel. Okay, so I hope that's helpful to everyone as we are all learning about this technology that doesn't seem to want to behave with the humans that created it. Nevertheless, language and communication. In the end, we will be talking about lessons learned as well. We're going to talk about communication styles, and we will be sharing our thoughts at the end of the webinar. Let's get into the meat of the discussion. The communication process. Are you all able to see that slide? Raise your hand. Great. The most important single change. It looks like half of you have raised your hands, and the other half have not. What I'm going to suggest is that you do as one suggested, go to your control panel and get onto the slide or log back in. Raise your hands now if you are able to see the slide. Good. A good percentage of them. Okay, the others you might want to suggest, follow my suggestion and log in again. I'm going to move forward, but communicate with us if you're having technical difficulties so we can try to address it. The most important, Your hand should be raised if the arrow is up, and your hand should be down if the arrow is down. Oh, at the top. Oh, I'm looking at it down on the bottom. Got it, got it. All right, we okay? I know, this is very interesting. I appreciate the laughter in the background. Yes. So you're a toggle. You're gonna raise your hand and put it down, but we should also be controlling your hand raising here as well. Okay, I think that we also have that control here. So thank you for saying that. So if you are able to raise your hand and unraise it, that would be helpful for the moment. And I hear a phone in the background, so if that person could put their phone on mute, besides the one that's speaking, that would be great. I'm going to try to move through this. But you know, this is an exciting webinar, and these technical difficulties, I will let you know, are not going to get into my way today. So that's important. The most important single change in human consciousness in the last century has been these doggone computers, these webinars, and these doggone phones. Never mind. But nevertheless, it has been multiplying the means in the form of what we call communication. Effective communication in the workplace requires a combination of different skills, such as the ability to actively listen, write clear and concise reports, use verbal and non-verbal forms of communication, and be aware of how others also use these approaches to one's advantage. According to Lawson, and that's Lawson, in 2009, in order to for verbal communication to be as productive and understood as possible, he says that special attention must be given to three main areas, including volume, speed of delivery, and vocabulary. Our different cultures often cause us to simply not discuss certain issues. For instance, take a conservative Christian, especially of old school values. They would have a great deal of trouble discussing sexuality and would find it virtually impossible to discuss homosexuality. With regard to newborn members of the culture, gradually they begin to learn assumptions, values, and beliefs as they grow and apply their language skills. Parents, older siblings, relatives, and others pass on cultural rules to conversation and behavior that's critical learning time. This process of learning culture can be applied to the workplace as well, which has its own culture and its own cultural rules. And we know that communication and the workplace creates a whole different language by itself and in phrases. And the language can create problems that do affect communication. Regardless of the workplace environment and the individual's role, it is essential to use language which is going to be most easily understood by the listener. A huge issue within the workplace setting is the use of jargon or in phrases. While such phrases or words are perfectly fine communicating with familiar colleagues in the office, it's critical that one remembers to cut out jargon, specifically when speaking to customers or those new to the job, to avoid confusion and coming across as rather arrogant. These problems in the workplace are a significant issue, and they are a significant issue regarding barriers to workplace communication, and that there is a perception which affects the way a conservative or a conversation or instruction is actually interpreted. Perception problems are particularly prevalent in work environments where there is a real sense of hierarchy and up and down, greater than thou, authority, and when there is a feeling of belonging to certain cliques within departments. As a result of such a system, it is far more likely that information provided by those on the quote-unquote outside will be accepted and respected. I speak to new employees, I speak about peers in their roles, because it's a new role. The family partner role is a fairly new role. An awful lot of time also is wasted going back and forth between the office department, the home, meetings, and field visits. I know particularly in Southern California and other rural areas, or not other rural areas, but in rural areas, distance between work and places that the consumer lives can be very stressful and cause a lot of difficulty, particularly for those junior members of staff, to be able to communicate with other staff, and particularly with higher levels of employers in the organization. Communication is a behavior affected by culture. Communication is far more than speech and writing. Most of us are unaware that we are even communicating in many different ways, even when we're not speaking. We are rarely taught about this mostly nonverbal form of human communication in school, even though it is very important for effective interaction with others. Growing up in society, we informally learn how to use gestures, glances, like changing into other auxiliary communication processes to alter or emphasize what we say or do. We learn these highly culture-bound techniques over the years, largely by observing others and imitating them. You know, one of those that come to my mind is we think of the African-American woman who is very angry, and what might you envision her doing? I know what I envision her doing. Putting her hand on her hip, not letting her backbone slip and riding her high. Her head goes side to side. You see that vision, I'm sure. But that's cultural. But that's what I see. Now, how many of you actually relate to this? Raise your hand. Yeah. I love seeing those hands up there. That means you're following really good. So within any particular culture, a person's values are usually very logical, and they make sense in that particular culture. So for these reasons, people should be very cautious about making wrong judgments about other people's values. If one really wants to understand someone else, one has to listen extremely well and try to get inside the head of the person. And one of those places we can do that is in peer groups, because peer groups have influence, and that is also a form of communication. It provides a sense of belonging and also a committed social responsibility. We are all influenced by our peers. The people of our own age, work discipline, hobbies, our interests, who are around us every day. Peer groups provide us with the safety of an identity. and an indication of who our friends are. These are the people we look to for our support, for understanding, for helping us to make decisions. Identification with the group gives us a sense of belonging. Sometimes these groups can influence how we think or act. This influence can be good, reinforcing what we know to be right, or provide us with information on how to act in a confusing situation. However, sometimes this influence is bad. It takes away from our own independence and right to make a decision based on what we feel or know, particularly in the workplace. I want to re-emphasize that our new staff, our new roles, our peers, and our family partners have a difficulty knowing their place. And the influences they have are their peer influences, and there are new peers that they need to relate to, and we need to develop a process for developing that relationship. Peers are a natural extension of the work being done, and they're an extension of who's been there and done that. They can connect where their peers and other staff can readily do also if we share how we do that. Peers foster an environment of committed and socially responsible staff who trust and respect one another, both intellectually and personally, so that creativity, ideation, and peer-to-peer mentorship can occur daily. This should be expanded in the workplace to include other staff to promote partnerships and teaming. Our peers and family partners are talented. They're motivated. They're paraprofessionals. They come from diverse backgrounds and boast a multitude of experiences that all contribute to workplace culture, the reduction of stigma, and building of rapport with the service population. However, in relation to not just the peer within the partner, but speaking to everyone, the managers, the supervisors, the directors, we all have to develop the capability to grow personally, to deal effectively with people. And I call this cultural intelligence. It's actually a definition for cultural intelligence. It's your capability to grow personally through continuous learning and good understanding of diverse cultural heritage, wisdom, and values, and to deal effectively with people from different cultural backgrounds and understandings. We all have to learn how to do this. In everyday life, we come across various forms of communication between parties. Communication content includes acts that declare knowledge and experiences, give advice and commands, and ask questions. These acts may take many forms, including gestures, nonverbal communication, sign language, body language, writing, speech. The form depends on the symbol systems used. Together, communication content and form make messages that are sent towards a destination. The target can be oneself, another person, or another entity such as a group or corporation. Have you ever wondered, really wondered, why people from some cultural backgrounds talk so loud? Why they may seem aggressive? Why do they stand so close to you when you're talking? Or maybe you wonder why some patients or consumers seem reluctant to speak or maintain eye contact. Could that be cultural? You may ask, why do some people from some cultures make it difficult to get a straight answer to a simple question? Why do some people from some cultures seem not to follow our advice? You can even ask, why is it that some patients never show up on time? Don't they own a clock? Is a lack of attitude towards time a cultural or individual behavior? Neither, or both. We'll talk about that. But first, let's look at this cross-cultural communication. People need the information they need. And Dr. He said, you wild adults, you don't need to know this, oh, that's it, And the young man in the seat says, Don't you tell me what you think I need. Now, cross-cultural communication, dealing with other people, knowledge, and misinterpretation. It's about dealing with people from other cultures in a way that minimizes misunderstanding and maximizes your potential to create strong cross-cultural relationships, to share knowledge. The key to effective cross-communication, cross-cultural communication, is knowledge. Let me say that again. The key to effective cross-cultural communication is knowledge. For example, one should always assume that there is a significant possibility that cultural differences are causing communication problems, and be willing to be patient and forgiving rather than hostile and aggressive if problems develop. One should respond slowly and carefully in cross-cultural exchanges, not jumping to the conclusion that you know what is being thought. Now this happens in the workplace often because sometimes we are taught like this. We are taught based on an outcome or a number of services. If he's an alcoholic, then he's going to end up like that. If he uses drugs, he's going to be like that. If she's a prostitute, and we just automatically attach words or ideas that we have to outcomes, and it affects our communication. And the different people I've spoken about all experience their own culture, their own way of life, and have their own means of communication. And by responding slowly and carefully, this will help in cross-cultural communication as well. When things seem to be going badly, just stop. Slow down and think. What could be going on here? Is it possible I misinterpreted what they said, or they misinterpreted me? Often, misinterpretation is the source of the problem. Active listening can sometimes be used to check this out. By repeating what one thinks he or she heard, one confirms that one understands the communication accurately. If one uses words that may seem different, they could be because they might be used differently between languages or cultures. So active listening can help you find these misunderstandings. You know, we talk about communication, but most of us are unaware that we are communicating in many, many different ways, even when we're not speaking. For this reason, if for no other, people should be very cautious about making moral judgment about other people's values. Values come out of one's cultural background. They are different to track, and they are most difficult to track down because the particular source are often a part of one's personal unconscious behavior. They really don't know where it came from. Let's talk a little bit about acculturation. There's a question, can I define what culture is? You know, I am so glad that you asked that question because this whole thing is about culture. And what I would ask each of you to do is to listen carefully for what culture is. I've said it once in the beginning. I've said it several times before. And I will say it a whole lot more times before the end of this webinar. And at the end of the webinar, please ask me that question again if you still love what culture is. Let's talk about acculturation and communication. We'll talk about also nurturing and the individualist versus the collectivist. In terms of acculturation, it's the process of acquiring other cultural approaches, values, etc. When you go into a new work environment, you're picking up a new culture. If you left a doctor's office or a lab to read only your white coat, and then you come into a mental health hospital, or not a hospital, but an office where they don't wear white coats, it's a different cultural norm. It's a different cultural norm when you're dressing in a suit versus wearing jeans and tennis shoes every day, or when your hair is done every day, or when you're in a very formal or non-formal environment. There are a lot of things that make your work environment different, including the language and the groups that are being served and the providers of that service. Language reflects culture, and vice versa. It reveals a cultural attachment, the forms of the language that we use, the formality of it, the lack of formality, the conversational rules, the in-group, the out-group identification, that being the knowledge of terminology and use, communicating with others who share a common set of experiences. Let me give you an example for that, an in-group and an out-group. Hey, bro, what's up? What's happening? Hey, what's up? Come on now. Are we on the low, the down low? No. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how to use all of those phrases, but it's a different language for a different goal. You said I was doing pretty good? Oh yeah, okay. I'm where my nephews just left. All right. But anyway, there's also another kind of language. Let me tell you, it can be friendly and not friendly. It means something totally different. And for those of you who are younger on the phone, don't get offended. But, sometimes women refer to themselves as a girl. Hey, girl, what's happening? Or they can refer to themselves as a bitch. Bitch. Hey, that's my bitch. Come on here, bitch. But you can also say bitch. Bitch. You could really say bitch and tick me off. Or you say bitch and I know that I'm loved. Okay, so I'm just letting you know that the tone and the language is all different depending on the environment that you're in. And then I could be looking at my pastor and I could be talking, and if I say bitch, I don't think that I should. I think that I should just say, I'm sorry, pastor, forgive me. So there are places that you say it and there are places that you don't. Now let's talk about nurturing, the nurturing culture. These are cultures that regard the support of relationships as an especially important goal. In some ways, the terms hard and soft are more descriptive of these types of cultures. If someone could put their phone on mute, I can hear doors opening and someone talking in the background. Hard cultures. If you can imagine Japan, Switzerland, Germany being hard cultures. Softer cultures would be Scandinavian countries like Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, maybe even Spain and France. In terms of the individualist versus the collectivist, individualist cultures, they view their primary responsibility as helping themselves and value individual accomplishments. That sounds like some of the workplaces I've been, where I've been in the background and everyone else got recognized, but I didn't get recognized for all the hard work that I was doing. But other people really felt it important that they be recognized and that their accomplishments be recognized. And they are really characterized by self-reliance and competition because they're always competing all the time. And we really find that prevalent in the United States and Canada, Australia, as well as Great Britain. Again, I'd like to ask the person who is speaking and has their phone not on mute, please put it on mute. Thank you. There's also the collectivist culture. They feel loyalties and obligations to an in-group. For example, extended family. And they are more attentive to and concerned with the opinions of significant others. And you find that primarily in Latin American and Asian groups. And what I hope that you remember out of all of this is that we all have layers of culture that define who we are, what we do, and how we behave. Enculturation. We learn that culture is learned through communication. And enculturation is a process of communicating one's culture to or via socialization, via or through a family, through the school, through the media, through religion, and even through the workplace. So I have a question for you. And I'm wondering if someone still could put their phone on mute because I could hear you. Tell me, think about it. How is the peer role actually being enculturated into the workplace? You have a few seconds to answer. The poll is open, and I hope that you see the poll. Good, it looks like most of you are getting it. That's great. The poll is going to be closing in a few seconds. 5 seconds. The poll is closed. And it looks like, before we get to this next slide, that none of you chose not at all in terms of the peer role being enculturated into the workplace. That 30% of you said it was being enculturated a little. 52% of you said it's being enculturated a lot. Somewhat. And 19% of you said that it is being enculturated a lot. And none of you said that you didn't know. I really appreciate that. So what that tells me is that we are aware of the peer role and that it is being integrated into our provision of service at many different places. Let's talk about stories and communication styles. You know, a good deal of our cultural learning comes from the stories that have been told to us. Stories of our lives. Humans have stories. We have stories. We make sense of our story as an unfolding story in a way that gives meaning to our path and direction to our future. All people experience this. Yes, I can still hear someone in the background. Please put your phone on mute. Thank you. A good deal of our cultural learning comes in the form of stories. From earliest childhood, we have stories told to us. We watch stories, listen to stories, some act out stories. Taken together, these stories help us to find out what our culture is all about. What is right, what is wrong, what is good, and what is bad, and how to behave in different situations. As we grow up, we develop a sense of who we are through the stories we tell about ourselves as well as those that are told to us. These stories help define us, explain where we've been, and capture our future aspirations. Culture and communication affects the styles that we have. And we'll talk about prejudice, cultural stereotyping, assumed similarity, as well as misinterpretation of codes. In terms of prejudice, that being an attitude that is caused by ethnocentrism. It is an unfairly biased and intolerant attitude toward others who belong to a quote-unquote outside group. And note that the root term in prejudice is prejudge. Cultural stereotyping is an exaggerated generalization about a group. Sometimes we could say something like, all women are emotional, all older people are out of touch with reality, and all immigrants are welfare parasites. That's cultural stereotyping. And then there's assumed similarity, where it's based on similar physical characteristics or cultural proximity. Just because you look like a group, you are that group, or because you live close to that group, you are that group. And then there is misinterpretation codes where we have an attachment of our cultural norms, our cultural values to others' behaviors and actions. So, for instance, someone belches, and you were raised that belching is rude. Well, in some cultures, belching means that was a doggone good meal and I want some more. But you could take offense to it when they were actually giving you a compliment. That's just one example. Intercultural communication. Now, we'll talk about intercultural communication in terms of cultural context and cultural barriers. And note that the ability to live with uncertainty is an essential ingredient of intercultural communication process. You know, there's someone's phone that's still on in the background, and if they could identify themselves, it would be wonderful. There is a suggestion that everyone who has their phone on mute and then raise their hand if you have a question. That would help. Thank you. Now, in terms of intercultural communication styles, intercultural communication itself is communication of group members that is influenced by different cultural perceptions, symbols, systems, both verbal and non-verbal, such as the deaf society or deaf community. You know, gangs even have that type of communication and symbols. And guess what else? Baseball has signs and symbols, so they're all over the place. Let's talk about cultural context just for a moment. Now, Edward Hall in 1959, he identified two distinct ways that members of various cultures deliver messages. And one is the high context culture. Now, the high context culture relies heavily on subtle, often nonverbal cues to maintain social harmony. Communicators in these societies learn to discover meaning from the context in which a message is delivered, such as the nonverbal behaviors of the speaker, the history of the relationship, and the general social rules that govern interaction between people. Now there is the low context culture, and the low context culture is the opposite. They use language primarily to express their thoughts. They use language to express their feelings, and they use language to express their ideas as directly and logically as possible. Now, to the low context communicator, the meaning of a statement lies in the words spoken. But if you look at the meaning of the high context person, the meaning of the message comes in the behavior of the person. Now, in terms of cultural barriers, ethnocentrism, if you didn't know what that was, I'm about ready to tell you what that is now. It's an attitude that one's own culture is superior to others. An ethnocentric person thinks, either privately or openly, that anyone who does not belong to his or her in-group is somehow strange, wrong, or even inferior. This happens in the workplace, too. I'm sharing this with you because we all have culture. It surrounds us. It oozes from us, within us, it's everywhere. And we have to think of things that will help us to work with culture and to communicate better. And one of those things is mindfulness. Because without mindfulness, you're in jeopardy of violating cultural rules and customs and your chance to build rapport. The definition for mindfulness is actually the awareness of one's own behavior and that of others. It is one important element for a communicator to acquire the culture-specific information that leads to confidence. Now, there is a Charles Berger, B-E-R-G-E-R, in 1979. He suggested 3 strategies for moving toward a more mindful, confident style of intercultural communication. One is a passive observation. He says that involves noticing what behaviors members of a different culture use and applying these insights to communicate in ways that are most effective. Another strategy he suggested is an active strategy by reading, watching films, asking experts and members of the other culture how to behave, as well as taking academic courses to better understand and deal with the intercultural communication. And the third strategy was self-disclosure. All peers know about self-disclosure, which involves volunteering personal information to people from the other culture with whom you want to communicate. One type of self-disclosure is to confess your cultural ignorance. For example, this is very new to me, so can you tell me what the right thing to do is in this situation? This is a question that you may want to ask. And in terms of those involved with the county, just heads up that county folks, I know that you have no mute button, but you can do *1 to get on the mute button above the green headset button on your screen. I mean, you can do *1 or you can press the green headset button on your screen. Just push it and your phone will go on mute. Okay, did everybody get that? That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're ready for another poll. I hope that you are. Because I taught you something and I want to know if you remember it. And that being mindfulness. The poll is going to come up asking you, what is mindfulness? You know what I just did? What did I just do? Anybody in tune with me right now? There you go! You are communicating with me! So, mindfulness, guess what it is? It's awareness of one's own behavior and that of others. Okay, I did the poll for you. I'm so glad you guys did that so well. Now, for communication styles, we'll be talking about manners of interacting, body movement, and posture. Now, general appearance and dress communicate. All cultures are concerned for how they look and make judgments based on looks and dress. Americans, for instance, appear almost obsessed with dress, especially in the LA area, but nevertheless, and personal attractiveness. Consider differing cultural standards on what is attractive in dress, on what constitutes modesty. Note ways that dress is used as a sign of status. And then there's body movement. We send information or attitude toward a person. Facing or leaning toward another person is attitude. We also share our emotional statute by tapping your fingers on the table, jiggling coins in your pocket, and also our desire to control the environment. We do that by moving towards or away from a person, showing our control. You know, there are more than 700,000 possible motions we can make. So impossible to categorize them all. But we just need to be aware that body movement and position is a key ingredient to sending messages. Now, posture. Consider the following. If you bow, it's not really done in the United States, or it's criticized. But when you're in Japan, it shows rank. Slouching, we do a lot of that. It's rude in most Northern European areas. Putting your hands in your pocket is disrespectful in Turkey. And sitting with your legs crossed is offensive in Ghana, Turkey, and in some Baptist churches you can't cross your legs. And showing the soles of your feet is offensive in Thailand and Saudi Arabia. Even in the U.S., there is a gender difference on acceptable posture. Isn't that amazing? But know that this all communicates something. So I want you to know that communication is much more than words. We also communicate with adornment and body reforming. Now, we've seen a lot of these things around us, and we do stereotype. We look at some people and we turn up our nose against them. They have cultures too. People in all cultures use clothing and other forms of bodily adornment to communicate. In North America, we dress differently for business and various recreational activities. Likewise, there are styles of clothing that are worn to sexually attract others. There can be great subtlety, especially in women's clothing. It can communicate that a woman wants to be considered sexually neutral. On the other hand, it may be meant to be seductive, innocent but alluring, etc. Women in the Western world usually are much more knowledgeable of and are concerned with subtle nuances and messages communicated with clothes than men are. At times, this leads to awkward errors of interpretation of female intentions on the part of men. Of course, clothing styles also are intended to communicate messages to members of the same gender. There are many forms of body decoration other than clothes that are used around the world to send messages. Even breast implants is a form of body reformation. These include these other messages that we send through body decoration or altering our bodies include hair paint, tattoos, decorative scarring and branding, perfumes, and even body deformation, as we see very well with the guy that looks like Star Trek. But I wouldn't say that to him in person. That's not a very nice thing to say. I would say, I'm sorry. But nevertheless, we know that these things include all these, and all these body costumes, whether temporary, even tweezing your eyebrows, or more permanent like tattoos or cosmetic surgery, are forms of self-creation. And it establishes a connection with the reference group. The cultural and social context includes individual body choices and gives them social meaning. The body can be a site for expression of power in a culture and for communicating group membership, social status, social identity, and associated beliefs and values. Ready for another poll? let's get at it. So, in terms of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning individuals, tell me, they have experienced mental illness. And do they cope with dual or double stigma? Yes, no, or I don't know. Close on it. Since there are only 3 responses, you've got a couple seconds. Hold the close in a couple seconds. The close now. Close. Close. The close. And to my amazement, 90% of you said yes. But actually, 10% of you said that you did not. Well, I'll give you a little bit of information. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, the effects of this double or dual stigma can be particularly harmful for members of racial and ethnic minority communities. The stigma of mental illness is layered upon racism and other forms of discrimination, leaving individuals and their families in a complex, highly vulnerable, and often helpless situation. Stigma has many effects, including feelings of low self-esteem, isolation, and hopelessness. Individuals who have a mental illness often face the same feelings because of the stigma and prejudice associated with poor mental health. Stigma in any form is serious and is a serious impediment to the well-being of those who experience it. So with that being said, NAMI has done their research, and yes, you are absolutely correct. They do experience double stigma. Let's talk a moment about teen and fashion. Although we may not think it really important, in my research I found that it was. Because much of the youth of America have had continuous battles with their own identity. When young men and women venture through the stages of adolescence, it's very common that they tend to adapt their peers' social practices. Young men and women may attempt to dress and act like others or popular individuals to try to gain acceptance from the same crowd. This can often lead to being guilty by association and give other people true incentive to stereotype them. Fashion indirectly creates cliques. Teenagers cling to these cliques according to their taste, and in turn the cliques influence their fashion. These cliques' fashion changes over time. Teenagers adhere to fashion to develop their sense of identity and to express themselves. Now, I know what these group I have here. How many of you remember elephant bell bottoms? Raise your hand. It's got to be a few of you out there. Elephant bell bottom pants? I know it's some of you out there. Ooh, look at that number going. Yeah, I know. See, now you try to put our kids in those elephant bell bottom pants today. You know good and doggone well they will laugh at us. Now, for teenagers, fashion is first and foremost a social stimulant. Yes, there you go. I appreciate you answering me. Thank you. It is an outward means of expression to their peers and the rest of the world. Fashion also provides identity to teenagers. It's a sense of identity by signaling which grouping they belong to. Are they prep, punk, goth, etc.? It may also signal a more independent or inclusive personality. Clothing also provides attraction. Teens can be extremely conscious about overall image when it comes to sexual fashion. They will often exploit fashion as a means to attract a certain type of person. And they use style clothing as a form of rebellion. It's a way of acting out. Since rebellion is often a huge aspect of a teenager's life, and it's not shocking that teens often use shocking fashion to rebel against their parents, their classmates, and other societal people. It's also a form of peer pressure. Many teens pick up on fashion trends in an effort to stave off humiliation and mocking from peers. So, you know, the quote that the parents want to teens to wear, they don't want to because of the peer pressure and influence that they experience. Poor fashion choices in the eyes of others can often be an open door to ridicule. And I didn't realize that for celebrities have so much influence on our teenagers. Fashion for teenagers is the result of the desire to be like a celebrity. Celebrities are perhaps the greatest influences on teenagers in the modern world. And they can have a huge impact on a teen's ideas about fashion and its importance. So we are fighting against media and the stars of the shows in terms of what they're wearing. So I would suggest that we find ways to be able to better communicate to our teens the fashion differences between those wearing clothes on television and people wearing clothes in real life. There's also a way of communicating the gender life. To use a picture, not the one shown before you, but to use a picture drawing as an analogy. When two men have a conversation, one draws a simple picture of what he is saying and shows that picture to the other man. Now once the other man understands the picture, he tears it up, leaving space for the other man to create his picture. Then the other man draws his own picture, displays it, and then he crumbles up his picture. They are both involved in their own construction and destruction of concepts and ideas, but they share them with each other. Women, on the other hand, communicate very differently. Women often converse from the heart, sharing memories that touch them, explaining the details of the story. They're not afraid to express emotion. They know how to listen, soothe and cool each other. This represents the feminine, the yin, the nurturing, the creative energy. They also know how to multitask, so can have a conversation with several layers without missing a beat. It becomes like a dance, where both women take turns leading and following. Now let's compare this picture drawing analogy when two women have a conversation. So one creates a picture, complete with color, shapes, and texture, and places it down in front of the other woman. The other woman either adds to this picture or creates her own picture to place beside the other picture. Neither destroys their picture, but instead keeps adding to both pictures, weaving an increasingly complex design. Sometimes we create and add pictures and things so quickly that it might look like a blur. There's some male standing nearby, but the women are so immersed in the flow of their dance that they understand each other, and all of the other women know them completely. Now, it's obvious that men and women communicate differently, but it doesn't mean that they can't understand each other. If each accepts how the other communicates and takes time to learn a new way of communicating, the differences can be abridged. Now, there's a question. Can a man communicate more like a woman and be sensitive? Of course, a man can talk more like a woman, and yes, a man can be sensitive, and that is really dealing with the man who is in touch with his sensitive side. And that is not in any shape, form, or fashion saying that a man is feminine. It is only saying that a man is in touch more with his emotional side than most men are. And I hope that answers your question. We can talk about communication also. Hair communicates too. You didn't know that, did you? Well-groomed, luxurious, lustrous, beautiful hair is so nice. It is quite simply beautiful and sexy. A woman loves to go to a hairdresser and just have her scalp massaged and not necessarily the dryer or the blow dryer because everything else comes with it. And coming out looking so beautiful and sexy and healthy and looking like they're so full of vitality. Hairstyles are both a display and a communication, revealing social status and membership of a group or tribe. Today, it is difficult to trace the background of certain hairstyles because various ethnic groups have mixed together and adapted to modern culture. Many hairstyles have died out, taking their secrets to the grave with them. The quality and appearance of hair is influenced by overall health and diet. I don't know if you know, but anorexics who starve themselves often have very fine brittle hair, deficient in various minerals. Hair and hairstyles have a complex meaning and a long history. In Africa, the fine braided rows of the hairstyle are a symbolic representation of the cultivation of the land, thus indicate civilization. These hairstyles are termed cornrows. Communication is far more than speech. Communication is a means for creating healthy relationships in the workplace and beyond. We communicate with gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and gaze, and finger pointing. While some say that facial expressions are identical, meaning attached to them differs greatly. Majority opinion is that these do have similar meaning worldwide with respect to smiling, crying, or showing anger, sorrow, or disgust. However, the intensity varies from culture to culture. Let's note some of the following. Many Asian cultures suppress facial expression as much as possible. Many Mediterranean, Latino, Arabics, their cultures exaggerate grief or sadness, while most American men hide grief or sorrow. Some see animated expressions as a sign of lack of control. Too much smiling is viewed as a sign of shallowness. Women smile more than men. And in terms of the eye contact in the gaze in the U.S., eye contact indicates the degree of attention or interest that you have in the subject. It also influences the attitude, change, or persuasion. It regulates interaction, it communicates emotion, and defines power and status, and has a central role in managing the impression of others. The Western culture, our culture, see direct eye-to-eye contact as positive. But within the United States, African Americans use more eye contact when talking and less when listening, with the reverse being true for the Anglo-American or the white person. This is a possible cause for some sense of unease between races in the United States. A prolonged gaze is often seen as a sign of sexual interest. Unless I'm staring at you, that means I might be not too happy. My kids know my gaze. The Arabic cultures make prolonged eye contact, believe it shows interest and helps them understand truthfulness of the other person. And a person who doesn't reciprocate is seen as untrustworthy. In Japan, Africa, Latin American countries, and the Caribbean, they avoid eye contact to show respect. Asian cultures, such as the Filipinos, the Malays, the Indonesian, Thai, and Indian, stress frequent bathing and often criticize the United States of not bathing often enough. This is so funny. Now, how might these differing expressions play out in the workplace in terms of status and professional relationships? And I will get to that after. I need you to try something for me. Know that all these gestures I speak of are impossible to catalog them all because there are just so many. But we need to recognize, one, the incredible possibilities and variety, and two, that gestures that are acceptable in one's own culture may be offensive in another. In addition, the amount of gesturing varies from culture to culture. Some cultures are animated, others restrained. Restrained cultures often feel animated cultures lack manners and overall restraint. Animated cultures often feel restrained cultures lack emotion or interest. So, although I can't see you, I need you to participate just for a moment. I need you to hold up your hand, the free hand, whichever hand is free. And we're going to do just an experiment right here, okay? So we have one free hand that's up in the air, and we're going to talk about simple gestures like hand pointing and how we can do it. So, let's take the index finger, that's the first finger next to the thumb, and point it. In the U.S., we point the index finger. We use the index finger and point. So point around and point, point, point. Now, use your baby finger, your little finger, and use that. Because in Germany, they use the little finger to point, 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 point. Now, Japanese, hold up your whole hand. They use the entire hand. In fact, most Asians consider finger pointing to be rude. Now, let's do some counting. Hold up your thumb. When you hold up your thumb, in Germany, that means 1. It means also 5 in Japan. Now, I need you all to hold up your middle finger. I didn't say to put the two sides beside it and make it look like a bench. I said you put the middle finger up all by itself. And that means number one in Indonesia. Isn't that wild? But what I don't want you to do is to practice using the middle finger as number one, because in the United States culture, we don't usually start with that finger. Touch and communication. Now, why we do touch? Why do we? Where do we touch? What meaning do we assign when someone else touches us? Well, let me give you an illustration for a moment. An African-American male goes into a convenience store, recently taken over by new Korean immigrants. He gives a $20 bill for his purchase to Mrs. Cho, who is a cashier. He waits for his change. He gets very upset when his change is put on the counter in front of him. Now, chat with me for a minute. Why do you think the man got upset? I need you to send me a couple of responses. And this can be a touchy subject. Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. One person said, because he wanted the money to be handed to him. And you are correct. He wanted the money to be handed to him for a couple of reasons. And this is what the problem was. It was a problem on both sides. Traditional Koreans and many other Asian countries don't touch strangers, especially when or between members of the opposite sex. So that was a woman with a black man who was a stranger. Now, on the African American side, he saw this as another example of discrimination, not touching him because he was black. Basic answer to touching is touch is cultural. It's culturally determined. But each culture has a clear concept of what parts of the body one may not touch. And the basic message of touch is to affect or control, protect, support, disapprove, like hugs, kisses, hitting, and kissing. Now, in the U.S., a handshake is common, even for strangers. Hugs and kisses for those of opposite gender or family are usual. And there are differences between African Americans and Anglos in the United States, however, because most African Americans touch on the breathing, but are northern touch on the head, like a good boy or a good girl also. Islamic and Hindus typically don't touch with the left hand. To do so is a social insult, because the left hand is used for the toilet function. And manually in India, to break your bread with your right hand is sometimes difficult for non-Indians. And then there's communicating with humor. Sometimes the two plus together. I feel that I have the worst job in the world. And the toilet paper looked at it and said, yeah, right. Now, sense of humor depends on your culture and what you've been exposed to. If you've been exposed to toilet paper, you know what it's used for. And if you've been exposed to a toothbrush, you might know what that's used for. But if you use toothbrushes to brush a horse's tail, and you use toilet paper to do origami, this may not make sense to you. Do you understand what culture does? Yes. Communicating with culture and humor can be, humor can be very difficult. Every culture enjoys some form of humor, but humor has difficulty crossing cultural boundaries, because what is humorous in one country is often not humorous in another. As an old Chinese proverb says, you get sick by what you put in your mouth, but you can be hurt by what comes out of your mouth. Then there are multiculturality, misunderstandings in terms of challenges, cross-cultural communication, and dealing with cultural groups. Culture in general is concerned with beliefs and values on the basis of which people interpret experiences and behave, individually and in groups. Broadly and simply put, culture refers to a group or community with which you share common experiences that shape the way you understand the world around you. The same person, thus, can belong to several different cultural groups, depending on his or her birthplace, nationality, ethnicity, family status, gender, age, language, education, physical conditions, sexual orientation, religion, profession, place of work, and its corporate culture, etc., 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 and etc. Now, culture is the lens through which we all view the world. It is central to what we see, how we make sense of what we see, and how we express ourselves. Culture is often at the root of the challenge. Exploring historical experiences and the ways in which various cultural groups have related to each other is key to opening channel for cross-cultural communication. The peer has not always communicated with the professional as a peer, staff, or employee. It's always been one up on the professional, one down you or the consumer, as the peers have generally felt it. And I'm speaking as a peer myself. Now we are peers where eye to eye we have different roles, and that has to be defined in order for communication to get better. Becoming more aware of cultural differences as well as exploring cultural similarities can help you communicate with others more effectively. Cultural differences in multicultural teams can create misunderstandings between team members before they can have a chance to establish any credibility with each other. Thus, building trust is a critical step in creation and development of such teams. As a manager of a multicultural team, you need to recognize that building trust between different people is a complex process. Since each culture has its own way of building trust and its own interpretation of what trust is. Communication and building trust, many experts agree that trust is perhaps the most important element of a harmonious, synergistic, and efficient work environment. Consider all employees as equal partners. Trust is established when even the newest rookie, a part-timer, or the lowest paid employee feels important and part of the team. This begins with management not being aloof, as well as getting out and meeting the truth. This should be followed by leaders seeking opinions and ideas from the very people working for you, knowing the names of employees and their families, and treating one and all with genuine respect. When employees feel everyone is pulling together to accomplish a shared vision, rather than a series of personal agendas, trust results. This is the essence of teamwork. When a team really works, the players trust one another. I want to talk to you about communication in a wellness environment for just a moment. You will find in the California Strategic Plan on Reducing Mental Health Stigma and Discrimination, you'll find that document at the California Department of Mental Health website, and you can also get a copy of this email me on. I want to let you know that as an individual, you are at the center of communication, and around you are families and friends, and then you have your professionals who also communicate with you. But as a peer professional, as a family partner, or as an intermediary type of individual, you have a culture, but recognize that the people outside of your circle also have a culture, and they're operating within many cultures, and that the further outside of the circle from you that you get, the more layers of culture are added on, and the more depth that you get. So all that I am suggesting is that culture is everywhere, and in order to create a wellness environment, we all have to be adept at culture, and know that culture and communication deals with nonverbal form of communication, and know that it's very important for effective interaction, because we all communicate all the time, every day. Sometimes we're not even aware of it. We communicate through gesture, body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice, as well as through the words we speak. These variables can be joined in a variety of ways in our communication. Add to this mix language, culture, and social differences, educational background, physical proximity, individual fears, insecurities, strengths, and weaknesses. No wonder communication is complex. So we deal with communication in a way that we refer to as one word, and we can call it paralanguage. It's what we say, it's how we move it, and it's how we say it, the verbal and the nonverbal form of communication. It carries much importance in terms of how we use our vocal characterizers, like laughing and crying and yelling and moaning, our volume, our pitch, our rhythm, and our tone. Our nonverbal communication is very important. However, there is a cultural attitude where we only listen to what is being said and not to how it is being delivered. Meaning, hear what I say and don't notice what I say and how I say it. That's not how it works. Paralanguage looks at what you say and also listens to what you say and watches what you do. I have a quick test here just to determine where you are. And you can send me a quick note and I'm going to let you know how old you are. It's the Chipman test. Where did Holy Ghost come from? And I'm going to say some words and you tell me where Holy Ghost came from. We don't want to mash potatoes. We don't want to do the switch or the twist. We just want to do. Since we want to do the Holy Ghost, come on, everybody. Let's do the Holy Ghost. Get up, get up, get up. Woman now, get up. You like the Holy Ghost? Now, I hope that some of you were able to respond to that because it's a whole long song. I don't want to bore the rest of you who don't know the song. So, let me know. And I'll end this little piece with, for each of our little proverbs that Holy Ghost wasn't really a proverb. We give you a proverb, and then I'll talk to you about proverbs. You got eyes to see and wisdom not to see. Muddy roads call the milepost a liar. Every bell ain't a dinner bell. A mule can tote so much goodness in his face that he don't have none left for his hind legs. And the graveyard is the cheapest boarding house. Those are proverbs. And for each of those proverbs, there are languages and dialects and meanings to those proverbs. And we use those culturally. And I want you also to be aware of that. We have communication styles, kinesis, which is the most obvious form of paralanguage. It's the body language. This is the language of gestures, expressions, and postures. And while the meaning of gestures and smiles may be the same throughout the world, the meaning of others may be completely different. For example, spitting on another person is a sign of utmost contempt in Europe and North America, but can be seen as an affectionate blessing if done in a certain way among the Maasai and Kenya. And we talk about nonverbal communications and kinesis in terms of tone and character of voice, in terms of the manner of expression. The meaning of speech can be altered significantly by tone and character. In English, we can simply say a sentence, "Hi, I'm here." Now, try it for yourself. Say, "Hi, I'm here," very nicely. Say, "Hi, I'm here" out loud. People might be looking at you strange, like you want someone to come check you out. Hi, I'm here. Now, say, "Hi, I'm here" because somebody did something wrong and they know you're home and you want them to know you're here. "Hi, I'm here." You know what I'm saying? The tone does affect the communication, even though the words are the same. Kinesics in Asians, they view silence as a show of respect. And they listen with significant nonverbal engagement. It's all about the manner of expression. Communication is a behavior affected by culture. Then there is also what we call proxemics. It's a fascinating area in the nonverbal world of body language, and that is the world of spatial relationships or proxemics. It's the study of man's appreciation and use of space. As a species, man is highly territorial, but we are rarely aware of it unless our space is somehow violated. And I want you to know this about the workplace, because when we hire new people, it's important to give them a space. Not have them use somebody else's space or place and not have any space of your own. We are not accepting them culturally if we do not give them their own space, and we're not having them be a part of the team or part of the group. Spatial relationships and territorial boundaries directly influence our daily encounters. Maintaining control over such space is a key factor in personal satisfaction. Observing spatial interactions in everyday life is a way to personal awareness and communication with others. If an individual is to be mutually satisfied in a communication encounter, his or her personal space must be respected. Changing the distance between two people can convey a desire for intimacy, declare a lack of interest, or increase or decrease the domination that spatial relationships create. Spatial changes give a tone to a communication. They accent it and sometimes even counteract the words that are spoken. We're coming to a close now. And I want you to remember that communication is about being courteous. Relax. Take your time. Ask questions. Wait and listen. It's a balancing act. Culture as a predominant force in shaping behaviors, values, and institutions. We have to remember that. We also need to remember that cross-cultural relationships between agencies and families may include major differences in worldviews, and that these differences must be acknowledged and addressed. We should remember that when advisory boards and programs include staff, volunteers, family members, and peers who share cultural background of their service population, and the programs tend to be more effective when we do. We need to remember that cultural knowledge and sensitivity must be incorporated into program policymaking, administration, and services. And we also need to remember that helping networks such as neighborhood organizations, community leaders, spiritual counselors can be vital in providing resources for recruitment, both for staff and volunteers. And that the concepts such as peer, family, and community are different various cultural groups, and for subgroups within those cultures, thereby impacting communication. So still recognize that communication will be a balancing act. And final thoughts are, Edward T. Hall defines culture as man's medium. There is not one aspect of human life that is not touched and altered by culture. This means personality, how people express themselves, including shows of emotion, the way they think, how they move, how problems are solved, how the cities are planned and laid out, how transportation systems function and are organized, as well as how economic and government systems are put together and function. It is the least studied aspects of culture that influence behavior in the deepest and most subtle ways. Cultures are not the product of lone individuals. They are the continuously evolving product of people interacting with each other. Cultural patterns such as language and politics make no sense except in the terms of interactions of people. If you were the only human on earth, there would be no need for language or government. So changing your organizational culture is going to be the longest and the toughest task you will ever take on. And it's my desire that you have learned a few things. And in closing, I would like to say, awareness of one's own culture and awareness that culture affects how communication is interpreted are obvious starting points when wanting to effectively change ideas and partner with those from other cultures to create an environment of wellness. When we listen, we are keeping ourselves open to the ideas of others, and we can be more able to ignore our own cultural biases that might block the exchange of messages. While this strategy helps us, it does not address the perspectives, understanding, and thinking of the other person. Remember, communication is a behavior affected by culture. What one is taught affects the values one maintains and how one behaves. Understanding how culture affects the messages one delivers and how one communicates is your opportunity to build on. So was this webinar okay? See you later. Thank you so much. Question and answers are following.
Okay, so the first one is this one.
Okay, the first question. Was the answer given to the question about $100? No, it wasn't. The answer is what? Fabulous. Yes. We'll give you a couple of minutes to allow you to submit your questions. And know that I enjoy providing you with information on communication. Thank you. I'll keep you there in silence as we are waiting for the responses, and I want to thank Working Well Together for sponsoring this dynamic webinar today, and Ron Shaw for being such a great technician because of this webinar, and also Kathleen Lilly, who's been incredible, and Margot and everybody else, and working all together and all through that conference as well. So how do you
Record it for e-learning.
How do we record for e-learning?
I've been recording it. I'll say
Ron has been recording the webinar. He will save it, and then we will, I guess, distribute accordingly. Not certain. Can you invite some people to share it if you have anything, a story, anecdote to share about communication in their workplace? Oh, shucks, I've got a lot of those. And even when I started working, being one of the first family partners, as it were called in the state of California, I started out speaking another kind of language. And some of you may have heard this before, but I was definitely the proficient use, I had the proficient use of four-letter words, not LCSW or MFCC, but those other four-letter words. And I put them in a row, and they made a sentence. And it seemed to make sense to me. But nevertheless, people saw through me, and not me necessarily being directly in the workplace, but they used me in the workplace because I was actually reacting and responding to some of the insensitivities that I felt as a family member that they didn't recognize. Like they would refer to me as a case, or they would refer to me as a client, and I would be right there. Or they would be talking about me, and I would be right there. Or they would say things to me and expect me to understand what they were talking about. And they had 6 months of training, and I didn't go to any of the trainings. And I just felt that the expectations were unclear. But because of the woman of who I was that had four-letter vocabulary, their task was to teach me new words so that I didn't use a four-letter vocabulary. And when I used a four-letter vocabulary, then they figured out that I didn't understand very well, and they needed to teach me something. So over time, my vocabulary expanded from four-letter words to actually true long sentences that I could share in many crowds. I hope that answered your question.
Have two people raise their hand to share their story.
And perhaps someone could raise their hand to share their stories. Is there anybody out there that has another story they'd like to share in terms of sharing workplace communication stories, why it's impossible? Because someone has a supervisor who is impossible to communicate. Let me share something with you in terms of communication for one, okay? One being, you don't know what's going inside the other person's head. That's the primary thing. The other thing is you should not take personally what the other person is reflecting. That's the second thing. Those are the two biggest things I think are most important. Because people have their own deficiencies. They may not be able to see that. They may be getting ill, but they may feel that they're in a position where they cannot show those weaknesses. And so instead of showing the weakness, they show you anger, they show you other things that are reflecting from the actual problem. And that's what I talk about creating a safe environment, building trust, building truth, because things build relationships and begin communicating. You actually begin talking about these things, and then you can begin respecting people, and they begin respecting you because now they don't have to hide, but they can actually talk about things. So I would say that one supervisor is probably dealing with the issue. Change is a big issue for a lot of people. They want things to stay the way that they were. They may have been told that they have to take on a certain staff person. They don't want that staff person. So they may be trying to get that staff person to quit because they don't want that person. This is just a hypothetical something I'm throwing out there. It could be anything. They could have a family member at home who is dying and they're not going to make it to work. We all have issues. We all have layers of culture that we're dealing with. Remember that diagram I showed you? So I hope that you have empathy more for people to communicate with you. And there are more than one way to communicate. You may not have to be a communicator. Sometimes you can have a friend or someone who knows that person better be able to communicate. Because that person is filtering your communication through their filters and they can't hear you. Say you're a big black Buddha bear, okay? I can't even listen to a word you're saying because you're a big black Buddha bear, all right? So if you put a nice handsome big black Buddha bear in front of me, I might be able to listen to it. But anyway, I think sometimes communicating in writing is hard too, like in email. Sometimes the people I work with write very clearly, so then it makes me realize that they bring something to the communication process too. And I would say yes. Writing does not have tone, it does not have inflection. Writing is actually words, so it's also how people interpret words. And I would highly recommend that if you are writing something that you feel may be offensive to someone else, that you actually have someone else read what you're writing. You do not have to divulge anything confidential, but you can ask them to read. And someone else said they have to keep in mind the style of communication from both writing and speaking to them. Absolutely right, because writing and speaking and even your body language, I am such an invisible person. When I'm not doing well, something's really bad in my life, I just do not show up at work, because everybody's going to be asking me what's wrong, and then I'm going to be upset. And I know that you were concerned for me, but I just want to put inside of me and fight with you because I'm a transparent person. That's not going to happen. So I generally call in a sick day or sit in the back and try to stay invisible, and I'm sure that some of you are also aware of that as well. I don't know if we have very many more questions, how many more people want to continue this conversation on communication, particularly as it deals with your workplace environment, because I don't know your situation. But know that Ron is here and that Ron can forward any information to me. If there is a specific question that you have directly, he can also forward to Kathleen as well if she makes herself available. Someone writes, thank you. This has been an enjoyable webinar. I need to go and have a blessed day. You be blessed too. And I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everyone. Ron, you have any last minute words?
I just want to thank everybody for the patience on dealing with the technology challenges that we had earlier today, but I really want to thank Connie and Smooth for coming today and presenting this awesome webinar. Two things I'd like to share. I will be sending out to everyone's email. There will be a Support and Empower an Employee networking call coming up, and the next one will be July 11th. And then be aware that there'll be monthly certification planning calls, and I'll send that flyer out too, and the next one will be July 25th. So I want to thank everybody, and please, one thing I have, yes? Yes, I'll take care of that too. One thing I couldn't do in a timely basis was get the eval up and going, so I need everyone to get to their computer and their email within hopefully the next hour, and hopefully you're at it, just to answer 4 key questions. Just give a rating of Connie's instruction and knowledge from 1 to 5, and of course 5 being the high. And the registration, was it easy and straightforward? And I already know the answer to that, but I still need to have your numbers on that. The training, did it meet your expectations? And the last one, can you use some of the practical skills and knowledge that Connie provided today within your workplace? So if you have any questions on those evals, please send them to my email. Yes, I'll send those to you too. Okay, so is there any other quick questions before we close for the day? Okay, I just want to thank everyone and look forward to some future webinars and the phone calling and the networking. All right, everyone, thank you and have a great day. Bye now. Okay. Whew, that was whew, the technology.